From a quiet workshop in California rose a machine that rewrote American speed forever. Today on American Muscle Soul, we reveal how the first Cobra came to life, rising from steel, sweat, and a dream no one else dared chase. Settle in and take this ride at a comfortable pace, especially if the years have taught you to care for your health and savor every moment. This is the origin story of the 1962 muscle car legend. Around the early days of the 1960s, American roads hummed with big iron and bigger promises, yet something felt unfinished. Speed existed, yes, but soul was missing. In the warm afterglow of our introduction, we slip deeper into that moment when the country stood at a crossroads, waiting for a machine that could blend European finesse with raw American force. That absence created a quiet tension, the kind only a true driver can feel. The sense that a breakthrough was close, but still unnamed. Carroll Shelby felt it more sharply than anyone. Fresh from retiring due to a troubled heartbeat, he carried both a racer's hunger and a man's reckoning with his own limits. He knew time was precious. He also knew America deserved a new kind of sports car, something lighter than the heavyweight bruisers of Detroit, yet powerful enough to humiliate anything wearing a crossed flag badge. He had spent years wrestling roadsters around the world, memorizing how a slender chassis and a willing engine could dance together, and how that dance could topple giants. While others accepted the automotive world as it was, Shelby sensed an opening wide enough for a revolution. Ford was experimenting with compact V8 engines cast in thin walls that trimmed weight without sacrificing muscle. Across the ocean, AC Cars in Thames Ditton crafted aluminum roadsters with the grace of hand-shaped metal but lacked an engine worthy of their craftsmanship. The pieces were scattered, but not one man had considered stitching them together. Shelby did. And in that decision, a whisper of destiny passed through American motoring history. Before anyone spoke the name Cobra, before the world met CSX 2000, the idea was already alive, waiting for the right hands to bring it into the sunlight. What Shelby sensed in the air was not imagination, but opportunity waiting for a brave hand to claim it. The moment he stepped away from the racetrack, he began dialing every connection he had, chasing the missing pieces that could turn his restless idea into metal and motion. Across the Atlantic, the craftsmen at AC Cars were wrestling with a quiet crisis. Their elegant Ace Roadster no longer had a reliable power plant, leaving a beautiful body without a beating heart. Shelby heard this and instantly recognized the opening. A light chassis shaped in aluminum, built with the precision of English hands, could be the perfect vessel for the American force he was determined to unleash. Meanwhile, in Detroit, engineers at Ford had been perfecting their new compact V8, a clever thin wall casting that shaved off pounds while keeping the full attitude of American horsepower. They needed a showcase, something fierce enough to challenge the pride of Chevrolet and prove that Ford could build more than family sedans. Shelby walked into that conversation with a grin and a vision, explaining how a modest English roadster could become a thunderbolt if Ford supplied the muscle. Some ideas require decades to convince the world. This one took a handful of conversations and a belief that speed favors the bold. Ford agreed to provide engines, AC agreed to build modified chassis strong enough to handle them. Shelby agreed to take responsibility for everything that happened next. In that triangle of ambition, the future 1962 Shelby Cobra CSX 2000 began breathing long before any spark plug ever fired. By the time the paperwork was done, the world had not changed. But the ingredients for revolution were finally gathered, and Shelby, more aware than ever of his limited time, was ready to shape them into a legend. Once the agreements were set in motion, the craftsmen at AC Cars rolled up their sleeves and prepared to reshape their graceful Ace into something far more defiant. Shelby's plan demanded a chassis that could carry American thunder without losing the agility that made the English roadster so compelling. That meant the old tubes and brackets would not survive. The frame was strengthened with thicker steel rails, each section hand-fitted and measured with the quiet patience only veteran metalworkers possess. They were building for torque they had never felt, for a kind of violence the Ace had never known. The suspension received the same disciplined attention. The front geometry was reworked to sharpen steering under heavy load, while the rear carried a stout Salisbury differential built to tame the surge of a compact Ford V8. Brakes were upgraded to disc units on all four corners, giving the light roadster stopping power far beyond its heritage. In the workshop, the car looked familiar yet somehow more serious, as if its posture alone hinted that something powerful was coming. All the while, Shelby watched from across the ocean, urging the builders to trust in the vision, even if they could not yet hear the engine that would complete it. The body panels were shaped again in aluminum, hammered gently until each curve settled into place. What had once been a delicate touring machine now carried a quiet tension beneath its skin, a readiness. When the final fasteners were tightened and the alloy panels polished, AC Cars stamped a code onto the frame, CSX 2000. It was merely a designation to them, a way to track an experimental chassis. But to Shelby, waiting impatiently in California, that sequence of letters and numbers signaled the birth of a machine that could rewrite American speed. The heart was still missing, yes, but the soul was already forming. When the aluminum panels settled into their final curves, and the frame carried the proud stamp of CSX 2000, the next chapter began, not on a road, but in the quiet belly of an airplane. The chassis, complete yet heartless, was crated and lifted into the cold air above England, bound for the sun-bleached edges of Southern California. It was a strange sight, a roadster without an engine or a voice, traveling across an ocean as if it already sensed that its destiny waited a continent away. Shelby followed every update with the urgency of a man racing time itself. He understood that what left Thames Ditton was only the foundation. The true transformation would begin the moment the car reached Santa Fe Springs, where the culture of American hot rodding lived in every tool rack and dust-covered floorboard. The shop of Dean Moon was no polished showplace. It was a proving ground where men shaped speed with their hands, and where the smell of fuel and ambition never faded. When the crate finally arrived, the team gathered around it, like surgeons meeting a new patient. They lifted the slender body from its wooden cocoon and marveled at its lightness. The lines were graceful, but beneath that grace lived the strengthened chassis, built to withstand power far beyond anything the English ace had known. To the untrained eye, it was simply a handsome foreign roadster. To Shelby, it was a promise waiting to be fulfilled. He ran his hand along the empty engine bay, imagining the thunder that would soon rise from that silent space. The arrival of CSX 2000 in California marked the meeting of two worlds, British craftsmanship and American force, preparing to ignite into something history had never seen. The morning CSX 2000 rolled into the shop at Santa Fe Springs. The men knew the quiet would not last. The empty engine bay felt like a challenge, a hollow space demanding something worthy of its strengthened bones. Shelby had already chosen the heart. It would be a compact Ford V8 with 260 cubic inches of displacement, a thin wall casting that balanced surprising lightness with the kind of torque that could twist weaker frames into surrender. The crew moved with a sense of ceremony, though none of them would have admitted it. They lowered the engine slowly, guiding the block into the narrow bay until steel met steel with a satisfying finality. It was a fitting moment, England whispering precision and America answering with power. Once the mounts were secured, the 4-speed gearbox followed, clicking into place as if it had been waiting its whole life for this exact assignment. Hours passed in a rhythm of wrenches and murmured judgment. Fuel lines were tightened. Linkages were adjusted by hand. Cables were routed with quiet focus. When the last connection was made, the shop fell into a rare stillness. Shelby stepped forward, reached for the ignition, and filled the room with anticipation. The first turn of the key produced a deep cough. The second brought a spark of life. On the third, the engine erupted into a throaty roar that bounced off the corrugated walls and settled into the chest of every man listening. A lightweight English roadster had just been given an American heartbeat, and it shook the floor with its arrival. In that moment, CSX 2000 was no longer a crate-borne experiment. It was the first Shelby Cobra, alive at last, ready to prove that speed favored those bold enough to build it. The first breath of the new engine still lingered in the shop air when Shelby eased CSX 2000 onto the California pavement. The car moved with a strange duality, light as a whisper, yet pulsing with a deep American rumble that promised trouble for anything wearing a rival badge. The suspension settled over the road with confidence, the strengthened chassis tightening beneath him as if eager to prove its worth. Shelby pressed the throttle gently at first, feeling how the compact V8 delivered its power in a clean rising wave. Then he pressed harder, and the wave became a punch. The roadster leapt forward so quickly that even Shelby, who had known fast machinery all his life, felt a jolt of disbelief. The car clawed from standing still to 60 miles per hour in little more than 4 seconds, its light aluminum body slicing the wind with the determination of a hunted animal turning into the hunter. On a lonely stretch outside the city, He let it run longer, and the quarter-mile disappeared in a blur of 13-point-something seconds. The world around him felt stretched, as if the road itself struggled to keep up. News of the machine spread faster than Shelby expected. Journalists arrived, expecting a clever curiosity from a retired racer. What they found was a compact roadster that could embarrass heavy American legends with nothing more than a twitch of its pedal. Some dismissed it as a parlor trick, convinced Shelby had built only one showpiece. He leaned into that assumption, repainting CSX 2000 again and again so it appeared as a growing fleet rather than a lone prototype. The deception worked. Whispers turned into rumors. Rumors turned into fear from rival camps. And on every test road and runway, the message became impossible to ignore. The 1962 Shelby Cobra CSX 2000 was not a novelty. It was a warning shot, fired squarely into the heart of American performance culture. As word of CSX 2000 spread, Shelby knew one prototype was not enough. A single spark can light a fire, but a legend requires a line of machines ready to carry the fight. With each demonstration run, each startled journalist, and each confused Corvette owner wondering what had just passed them, the path forward became clearer. The real work was only beginning. The English chassis had proven it could hold American muscle. Now Shelby had to turn that proof into a production reality. AC cars began preparing additional bodies, each shaped in familiar aluminum, but now reinforced in all the right places. In California, Shelby's crew refined their methods, adjusting engine placement, improving cooling channels, and stiffening mounts to handle even greater power. The Ford V8 260 cubic inch engine had awakened the first Cobra, but Shelby felt the hunger growing. He knew the platform could accept more. Soon, Ford delivered their 289 cubic inch version, a hotter, stronger variant that pushed the chassis closer to its limits and turned the nimble roadster into a true predator. Once these upgraded Cobras reached the racetrack, the transformation was complete. They entered Sports Car Club of America events with little more than confidence and raw mechanical imbalance in their favor. Lightweight fighting against overwhelming torque. The results stunned the racing world. Corvettes, long the symbol of American performance pride, found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned by a car that looked too small to be dangerous. Crowds learned the name quickly, and competitors learned it painfully. Through every victory, one truth stood unshaken. None of it would have existed without the first step, without CSX 2000, proving that something hand-wrought in England and reborn in California could overpower giants. Every Cobra that followed, every trophy earned, every Corvette humbled on a straightaway, owed its existence to that original 1962 machine that dared to be different. By the time the racing world began to bow to the rising fleet of Cobras, the significance of CSX 2000 had already outgrown its aluminum skin. It sat in Shelby's shop like a quiet elder, watching younger siblings roar onto tracks across the country. Yet everyone who understood speed knew that without this 1962 machine, nothing that followed would have existed. It was the lone bridge between two continents, the first to prove that British finesse and American strength could fuse into something neither world had ever built alone. Shelby often returned to the original car, running his fingertips across the same panels that had traveled from Thames Ditton to California before any engine ever touched its mounts. He remembered the long nights spent planning, the first deep growl of the Ford V8, and the disbelief on the faces of those who witnessed its early runs. CSX 2000 was more than a prototype. It was a declaration that innovation did not need permission, and that courage could reshape an entire industry. As years passed, the car became a treasured artifact, protected and revered, not because it was the fastest Cobra, but because it was the first one to breathe. Collectors, racers, historians, and dreamers all recognized its unmatched value. Every dent, every weld, every hand-shaped panel carried the imprint of a turning point in American automotive history. Even today, when people speak of muscle and soul in the same breath, the story always circles back to this roadster, born in 1962. It taught Detroit that light could be mighty, and taught racers that heritage meant nothing without heart. CSX 2000 remains a legend because it proved that a single idea, driven by necessity and daring, can ignite a revolution that still echoes across American roads. If you enjoyed tracing this origin with us here on American Muscle Soul, tap like, subscribe, and stay with the channel for more deep mechanical stories that keep automotive history alive.